Hello, welcome to the final round of the 2020 Go-Kart Championship. Here are the championship standings going into the final round of the season. It's very, very close at the top of the standings. I'm sitting on 278 points, just ahead of Tom L on 253. John is sitting in third place, looking to confirm that place in the championship once again on 170 points. My dad is on 145 points in fourth, and then Dom in fifth place in the standings, currently on 101 points. And let's look towards the second part of the standings. Chris on 85 points, Greg on 74, Victor on 74 as well. Tom B in ninth place on the standings with 59 points. It's interesting going to the final round of the season if any of these places are going to change. We should also look at the bottom of the standings as well. We've got Tom C on 40 points, Kim on 25 points, and Jake in 12th on 24 points. So the final round of the season here today at the Lydd International Kart Circuit in Kent, I think. So let's get out on track here for the first of two races. The points will be scored for the first race and the second race, and also a fastest lap time trial in the first race, and then a fastest lap time trial in the second race as well. So there's more than just the points up for grabs on the road. So it's wet down here at Lydd, and only my camera is working today. So unfortunately, as you can see, the conditions were not easy at all, and on this outlap I was just sort of trying to get used to the conditions, and later on we're going to be switching around into reverse championship order, which means that George will be starting in first because he hasn't actually competed around the championship so far this season. John will be starting second on the road because obviously he's third place in the championship, and then Tom L will be starting second place on the road, and third place on the road, and I will be starting in fourth place on the road as I'm currently leading the championship. So they had no sort of qualifying ever for us at Lydd, so that's the way we're doing it, just reversing the championship order. And let's have a look here, and George, he got into the lead of our pack, but then spun it at the final corner coming around to start the race. So John leads across the line, Tom L, then myself, and really unfortunate there for George. He was in a good position to possibly look for a podium, maybe even his first win in a long time, but he unfortunately spun it at the final corner coming to start the race. So I'm currently in third position here, going to try and chase down Tom L and John just in front here, and these conditions were really, really awful, really hard to just get the kart in any sort of straight line. It was a big learning experience for me. I don't think I've ever driven a kart in the wet round Lydd before, and I was struggling, really struggling here today, just couldn't get the flow. I mean, I know the track is changing constantly as you go around and it's drying up, obviously, but I just couldn't get any rhythm in my driving here today. I was a little bit gung-ho, I guess you'd say, just sort of not really going, finessing it around the corner, just making silly mistakes like this, and doing stuff like that constantly is not good whatsoever. You can see I'm annoyed with myself here. Let's skip ahead a couple of laps, because by this point myself and Tom have got past John, so Tom is leading this race. I'm trying to get down the inside, but couldn't quite do that one. So Tom leading this race, exactly what he needs for the championship, because of course he's coming in a little bit down on points, but I don't know, just making silly mistakes all over the place here and really costing myself time. You can see I've got more mud on my suit, obviously another off at some point, so just making silly mistakes, and you can see I've lost a little bit of time here. So Tom, I sort of managed to keep up around the second half of the lap, but Tom's sideways out of the final corner, but in the first part of the lap Tom really managed to be braver than me through here in these wet conditions, finding those braking points perfectly and managing to pull a gap on me. But that's how that was, and we're just holding on this camera view here just to see what the gap is here. So you can see quite a significant gap now to John, who, as I said, is sitting in third place. There he is. He passes the checkered line to go across, and then George not too far behind considering he had that spin early on, and he's going through in fourth position there. So interesting to see how everyone's doing, but quite a big gap between myself and Tom in the lead this race and John in third. But he told me himself he was struggling as well. You can see I'm really getting frustrated at myself here, making mistakes, losing time to Tom. And as you can see here, that gap is widening. Tom is extending his lead out in the front of this race. Exactly what he needs to do to try and claim this championship. And you can see that gap's probably about 2 seconds. So he's doing a good job here. I'm really struggling to keep the car on the track and make any sort of meaningful progress here and try and close down Tom, because I need to, if I want to obviously win this championship, I want to grab that win. And of course there's quite a big points gulf between first and second in these races, so you want to be trying to go for that, even though it is a bit of a risk to do so. So you're struggling trying to wipe the water off my visor, and just really struggling to take any meaningful line around these corners. I think I was getting a bit flustered at this point. You can see by the driving it's all on edge. It's not natural, which it should be in these conditions. You should sort of be smooth. You shouldn't be making these erratic movements really with the steering wheel, and I am doing so, and that's really costing me here and just making loads of mistakes all over the place here and deservingly losing time to Tom in the lead of this race. And he is just doing a much better job than me in this first race of the day. But as I'm only showing you highlights because of our not so extensive video footage here today, you can see we're catching up to John, who we eventually get past a couple of times in this race. 4 minutes to go there, and this is now the checkered flag, so you can see George goes past nearly a lap down, and then there we go, myself and Tom go across the line. I managed to catch up but can't get to pass. Tom wins the first race of the day by a quarter of a second. That's how close it was. I mean, I really kept pushing, really struggled at stages in that race, but very thankful to come home with the second place there, because it could have been in the bark at Lydd and out of this race quite easily. So that's some important points for the championship. Tom finished 15 laps. As I said, I was only 0.250 behind. John ended up 2 laps behind, so did George. So not the best races for those guys, but they'll be happy just to get to the finish of that one. It was really not fun out there in terms of the conditions, but always exciting to try and learn the conditions and improve. And I think I kind of did, because you can see in terms of the lap times, I just managed to beat Tom. It was very close between us there in the same 1/10 of a second, but I managed to just pip him to that first position in the time trial. The time trial doesn't really weigh much in terms of points, but it's a nice, obviously, first position to have. And you can see that the gap back to third and fourth, George managed to actually get a faster lap than John, but obviously John being much more consistent in that one to bring home third place in the race. But John's ultimate pace obviously struggling a bit there in the first race of the day. But it's not all over. We've got one more race to go in this season of 2020 at Lydd once again, and then we're going in terms of reverse fastest lap. So John leads, George is second, Tom is third, and I'm at the back once again. So John's taking a nice healthy lead through the first couple of corners. George slightly backing up, and I think myself and Tom managed to get past him as they go through for the second time. And you can see John's kept that lead to Tom and myself, and a little bit of a gap back to George in fourth place, but he's doing a good job to hang on. George's ultimate pace was quite strong in that first race. Skipping ahead a couple of laps, you can see that myself and Tom have got past John now. Tom leads again, I'm in second, John in third, and George in fourth. Once again, apologies for the not so extensive video coverage here. And by the time we come round a few laps later, I've managed to take the lead from Tom. Once again, apologies for not quite having all the footage available to us here today. Quite a few restrictions on a lot of circuits around the UK now, understandably, so following those. But I'm holding on this shot here because it's interesting. By the time we come round this time, George has actually managed to get past John into third place. So good stuff from George here. As we saw in that first race, the ultimate pace was better from George. But John is going to want to try and get that third place back. Of course, he's got a good percentage of podiums this year, so he's going to want to try and keep that up here at Lydd. So on board with myself here in the lead of this race, really struggling to keep the cars on the circuit, but doing a little bit better in this second session of the day. I think a bit of confidence. I needed that break in between sessions to sort of just calm down and think about what the situation is out there. Obviously, at the end of the day, it's just a bit of fun, but Obviously I do like to sort of think about our little championship we're holding here as well, but the conditions were improving, but not drastically. There was still a lot of water out there, lots of random places on the track. It was not the easiest of conditions, as you've probably seen throughout this time already. You can see some of the marshals were having to clear up parts of the track as well. So just saying thank you for doing that. And you're watching this footage and you're probably realising I'm really struggling in these conditions, as John manages to catch up to George a bit here. We didn't quite catch what happened to John in terms of going off the track possibly, or maybe having a half spin, but he's catching up to George, but there is not a huge pace difference between them here, so I wonder whether John's managing or going to manage to get past in this race. But as this is the only onboard footage we have, I think it's pretty clear to see I'm not having my best days, struggling, lots of sideways moments, no consistency out there. It's not what you want when you're driving a kart in these conditions. I think I'm just I'm not driving angry like I mentioned in one of the Bayford videos, where I was sort of just going for every overtake possible. I think I'm just a bit more frustrated here that I'm just not able to find that, that consistency which I am able to find in these rental karts most of the time. I'm not saying I'm good, but I am able to find a bit of consistency in rental karts. I think pro karts would be a completely different story. I'd be absolutely nowhere. But you can see now the battle between John and George. They're side by side across the start-finish line. George going down the inside. No! It must have been a back straight manoeuvre there from John, managing to get past George there for third place. But good stuff from John, keeping the pressure on George, and he got that position. George, who has been a sort of regular of this championship now for a couple of seasons, hasn't really been able to make many of the races early on in 2020. This was before the pandemic sort of really came to the UK. So this was back in February, so a long time ago. Of course, the problem that many people have with the championship is obviously work and having to fit around work to come in karting. Obviously, karting does come second most of the time. But you see a bit sideways from myself there. Even though I've got the lead here, I'm not easing up. I'm still making some... Well, I'm sort of pushing the limit, maybe you could say, a little bit, or pushing the limit of my abilities, struggling quite a bit at numerous points around the circuit. And I'm watching this back, not a very good approach into a lot of these corners here. I think I was just very frustrated at myself for it. It's like, why am I just not able to do this? I felt like I was able to do this in many of the other circuits that we have these wet conditions, but just today, just really, really struggling to do anything meaningful out there. Just felt like I was really languishing, and I think ultimately Tom was quicker than me here today for pretty much all of the time. I was just lucky to manage to get a move in. Now, I know the fastest lap was mine in that first race, but I think that was more down to the fact that I was following Tom and able to sort of pick up the markers, whereas he was going into the unknown each lap. He was the first person to go into the conditions, and the gap between us in that time trial was so small, it didn't really mean anything. It was basically the identical same times. But as I come around the final corner, I'm getting very, very sideways, just about managing to keep the kart in a straight line. Doing sliding like that is not good whatsoever. You're losing lots of time by doing it, so that's not ideal. We skip ahead though a couple of laps. You can see the view from the outside, how close it is between myself and Tom. You can see he's right behind me, just as it was really in the first race, but the difference here is he's been right behind me all the time in this second race, whereas I drifted off a couple of seconds back on a few occasions. He's been sort of sticking to the rear bumper of my kart for the whole time, and that'll be interesting to see what happens in the time trial competition for this second race, and we'll obviously get to that a little bit later on. But look at the steering angle here. I was trying different techniques lap on lap, and I felt like nothing was working, so it obviously wasn't my day. I'm fine to say that. Happens more often than I'd like, saying that I have bad days in karting, but I know it's a bit of fun at the end of the day, as we've already mentioned. But of course, like many of us, I like to do well in karting and stuff that I compete in, so it's always frustrating when I know I'm not doing as good as I maybe should be doing. But once again, sliding a lot round the final corner. I'm surprised that Tom hasn't managed to find a way through at this point, because I am making quite a few mistakes, but at the same time it's very hard to make a manoeuvre in these conditions, because you sort of have the line you're taking, which is generally the optimal line for these conditions. I say that, but my lines are all over the place, but generally it's the person behind you sort of following the person in front, unless you see a place on the circuit where you can drastically make up time or go for a gap. So it's kind of hard to go offline, go off the drier part of the track and make a manoeuvre, because of course then you're going to the wet part of the track. If it's in a braking zone, you're going to be braking earlier. So many variables in conditions like this, it's very, very tough to make a manoeuvre. So I guess it was quite lucky I managed to make one early on, because possibly it wouldn't have happened later on. See, sideways, I'm like sideways through the whole long left-hander in the middle part of the Lydd circuit, and make a bit of a mare of it on the exit, and finally to the back straight. Not happy with myself here, not doing a good job. So now let's skip ahead, and you can see here George and John. John's still only just ahead of George. He's doing a much better job in this race of keeping up with John. Made some mistakes in that first race which put him behind. You can see myself and Tom separated by basically nothing, still going on to the last lap of this race. So let's go back on board with myself, still struggling. Definitely getting annoyed at myself looking back at it, just making so many mistakes. I'm just going to tick it down as one of those days. So nonetheless, we're coming around the long left-hander for the last time, then the fast switch back to the right, and then the long back straight for the last time of this season. 2 more corners to go. It's going to be really interesting to see how the championship standings play out. This win should put me in position to take the championship, but it's going to be very close, that's for sure. Sliding round the final corner to take the flag, and first position in the last race of the season. Very happy with that. See, celebrating a little bit and then just getting a bit of air into the helmet after a frustrating race for me because I was making so many mistakes. So there we are, a long season of karting. Well, long in terms of many races, not in terms of the length between the first and the last race of the season. That was actually only a matter of weeks, but long story. Let's have a look here. Feature race number 2. There are the results. 17 laps completed by myself. Tom was 0.345 behind me at the end of the day, and then the gap back to John and George was both 1 lap. So they did a much better job here in the second race, much closer to us at the top of the standings. So good stuff there from John and George, and interesting that George was so close to getting John in that race, but unfortunately for him, not quite enough to overhaul him and get him a podium in the races. So 2 third places from John here today. Obviously will confirm him in 3rd place in the championship, which we'll get onto in a little bit. Fastest laps pretty much as close as they were in the first race of the day. My fastest lap, 48.291, so about a second faster than we were in the first session, but the track not drying out too much there. Second position was Tom L, so 48.360, so less than a tenth of a second, very close. And to be fair to George and John, both of them were much closer in this second time trial of the day. George on a 51.0 and John on a 51.1. So John not having that ultimate pace of a 1 lap, but consistency was there over George through the race. So championship standings, there we go. I managed to just about win the championship here in 2020. A really great season, fought alongside Tom here. It's great to always battle against Tom, a really fair racing driver here, and really nice to have a whole season alongside him. We all competed in all the races, and so did John as well. So that's the one disappointing thing about this championship season, was that only 3 of us managed to compete in all of the rounds. I guess with everything that was sort of going on at the start of 2020, that is understandable. So there we are, the gap from first and second was 29 points. John was in 3rd, he was on 2-1-2. My dad obviously not taking part in this final round of the season at Lydd. He finishes the season on 145 points, so that'll be 44 points ahead of Dom on a 101 here to end off the season. So good stuff from Dom. Hopefully he'll be back in 2021 for some more racing. Let's look at the second part of the championship standings. So 6th place was Chris on 85 points, Greg on 74. Same with Victor, he finished on 74 points as well. Tom B just behind those guys with 59 points. So once again, hopefully more of these guys will be back for 2021 karting. That should be a lot of fun to have a more consistent championship with more and more drivers. So let's have a look towards the bottom end of this championship standings, but still some good drives in there nonetheless, even though all of these drivers only competed in sort of one round. Jake and Kim on the bottom of the standings on 25 and 24 points, but George got some really good laps in there at Lydd, to be fair to him, beating John around a track that John knows well over a lap. Not bad whatsoever from George, even though it says only 11th in the championship. Still some good performances. And Tom C, some really good performances actually from him at the Q Leisure round we had last time out, round number 4. So that's the championship standings for 2020, but also want to look at some statistics throughout the season. It's quite interesting to note some of these. So over the whole year we had 23 sort of sessions, if you will, not all races, but some time trials, some quali races, some qualifying, all thrown in here. This is what it looks like. I managed to take 17 of those. 4 of them went to Tom, 2 of them went to Victor B, and 1 went to Dom. So there's a duplicate in here, as you would have realised. There's 24 wins there, and that's because one of the Q Leisure rounds was a tie between myself and Tom. So that's the reason why there are 24 when there was only 23 sessions. Now an interesting one here, statistics in terms of the podium rate percentage. So Tom only missed 1 podium throughout the whole year. Fair play to him, really good stuff from him. I had a bit of a mare at Bayford Meadows, which took my podium percentage down to 87%. Victor had some really good performances, to be fair to him, at Bayford, so he's on 80%. And then John, who competed in the whole season, really good from him as well, to be fair, to be 48% of the time on the podium. Really good improvements there from John. He had a consistent year. And Dom obviously on there as well with 44%. So also a new event for 2020 was the CLUBMANS trophy, which we're handing out to a driver who has not won a championship. So there are a couple of drivers eligible for this. So myself and also John, he won the Winter Championship a couple of times. And also Will, who didn't manage to come to any of the events this season. He was also eligible. So that is how the CLUBMANS trophy looks. A dominant victory from Tom, obviously taking part in all the rounds on 305 points. My dad, unfortunately not having the best of times in the CLUBMANS trophy, still finishing second, but he'll still be eligible for it next year, whereas Tom L won't. More information is available on the website if you're interested, so only those 3 drivers, including myself, are not eligible, and only the races were counted. It's a bit of a complicated set of rules I set up for this championship, but Tom wins it. Commanding championship win for him. That's it for the 2020 Kart Championship. Thank you so much for watching throughout this year. We'll be back for more in 2021 alongside more videos on the channel. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a great New Year's, and we'll see you soon. Goodbye.